What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves, physically, emotionally, and spiritually?
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago, we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique.
Help other people to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores Cannon has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT. Now you can learn her method by going directly to themoreshow.com/QHHT. And don't forget to mention the discount coupon MORETALKS. James Szubski, just thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
James, just for the audience to begin with, just give us a little bit of a bio about yourself as well.
Sure. So I live down here in the Columbia River Gorge, and I've been in Washington State since the late 80s, but mostly up in the Seattle area. About 2 years ago, my mother-in-law passed away, and she left behind some businesses here in the Gorge. And so my family has moved down here, and we have had just an amazing experience related to paranormal activity. One of my businesses is an outdoor store, and people started coming in and telling us some pretty amazing tales about Sasquatch encounters and UFO encounters. So we put up a big sign in the window that said, "File your paranormal reports here." And wow, it has been an amazing journey. In the past year and a half, we've had over 150 reports. So so a little bit about my background and where I'm coming from. So I have a lot of experience in outdoor adventure. I was a highly decorated infantry soldier with the U.S. Army. I was a wildland forest firefighter and a mountain guide, and more recently a search and rescue EMT. And so one of my mother-in-law's businesses was a storefront, but it really wasn't doing well. So when we moved down here, I took what I knew and we converted it into an outdoor store. And you know, the Columbia River Gorge is simply one of the most beautiful places on earth. And to me, one of the most incredible adventure areas I have ever seen in all of my years of adventuring. And then to layer this paranormal thing on top of it, it really has just been an amazing experience.
Yes, and now the store that you talk about, that's the Maggie's Outdoor Store. That's your mother-in-law's name, I'm guessing. And
yeah. So Margie's Outdoor Store, located in Bingen, Washington. For those who know a little bit about Northwest geography, we are about 60 miles east of Portland, Oregon. And the Columbia River forms the boundary between southern Washington and northern Oregon State. The Washington side is less populated than the Oregon side. And so a lot of folks know of the town of Hood River, which is famous for being one of the windsurfing and kiteboarding capitals of the entire world. People are windsurfing and kiteboarding on the actual Columbia River itself. There's a bridge that connects the two states right there. And so we're on the Washington side of the Hood River Bridge.
Yeah, it's very difficult to describe the gorge. We're going to have some pictures come up in just a moment with yourself, but it's such a beautiful place.
You're absolutely right. Back in the late 80s, the U.S. government recognized that this was a national treasure. And so it was designated as the country's first national scenic area. The gorge itself is about 85 miles long. And from my store, there are 3 stratovolcanoes within 40 miles. So a stratovolcano, these are volcanoes that are over 10,000 feet tall. Famously, Mount St. Helens erupted in 1980. Mount Hood is on the Oregon side, and Mount Adams, which is very famous for all the UFO encounters that go on in that area. And so those are all very nearby. But the gorge itself is the only sea level passage through the mighty Cascade Mountains. To give your listeners a sense of scope and scale, the Cascade Mountains start in lower British Columbia and they extend to northern California. Famous mountains like Mount Rainier, Mount Shasta are contained within the Cascade Mountains. So 80,000 square miles is slightly larger than the 10 smallest states in the United States combined. It's roughly the same size of the island of Britain. And it is some of the most wondrous, rugged, mountainous terrain in the entire world. And so, like any mountain range, we are, to the west of us is the Pacific Ocean, about 100 miles away. And the Cascade Mountains form a rain shadow. So on the eastern side of the mountains, it is Pacific Northwest rainforest that sees more than 100 inches of rain a year. On the eastern slopes, it becomes more desert. And so we've got high plains desert on that side, which sees less than 10 inches of rain a year. So my home is in the town of Stevenson, which is on the rainforest side. And when I get up and drive to work in the morning, my stores are sort of right at the edge of the desert. I drive 25 minutes and I start in the rainforest and end up nearly in the desert. It's like I said, it's amazing. And so it's the second largest river in North America. And it is the largest river in North and South America that empties into the Pacific Ocean. And so the Columbia River forms, like I said, the only sea level passage through the mountains. It's a very rare geologic feature to have mountains that are, in some places over 10,000 feet tall, and then have the sea level base for it. There are places in the gorge. So the gorge is like a giant canyon. There are more than 90 waterfalls here, and some of them are over 600 feet tall. And they're cascading down these astonishing columnar basalt cliffs. So just like the in the Causeway of the Gods, something like that. Anyway, we've got these enormous hexagonal columns. When the basalt cools, it cools in these hexagonal patterns, and they form these beautiful column cliff sides. So we have all of that going on. The place is riddled with caves and rivers that flow off these glacier-clad mountains. Like I said, there's desert and there's rainforest. I was out today before the interview, and the air was filled with the smell of wildflowers. And in the springtime, the place is awash in color. We have numerous endemic species of plant life here that only grow in the Columbia River Gorge. It is, in fact, a living landscape. Like I said, in the 80s, we had Mount Rainier erupt. There has been recent geologic landslides. But what makes this place so astonishing is that it was formed with truly apocalyptic forces. Some of your listeners may be familiar with the work of Graham Hancock or Randall Carlson, who talk about, this Younger Dryas catastrophe that occurred on Earth. And one of the places they talk about a lot is Eastern Washington and the channeled scablands. So a little bit of context, they estimate the Columbia River to be about 20 million years old. So this is an incredibly powerful current of energy that has been flowing through this landscape for basically forever. Well, about 15 million years ago, giant fissures opened in the earth on the Idaho-Washington border, so east of us, a couple hundred miles, and erupted out of these fissures opening there. And you can imagine, just like a Hawaii lava flow where it's, the lava is shooting up into the air. Well, so much lava came out of there that it flowed 300 miles to the ocean through the ancient Columbia River bed. And so the river and the lava were fighting all this time. But the amount of lava, so they estimate there were over 300 eruptive episodes. And the amount of lava is in some places 3 miles thick. If you were to spread that out over the entire United States would be buried 60 feet deep in lava, which is cooled into basalt. So you've got this true apocalypse by fire happening between 15 and 12 million years ago, up to 300 events. And it created this layer cake of stratified lava flows. Then about 2 to 5 million years ago, the Cascade Mountains started rising up. And you had this a very strong vertical energy flow, and then this incredible uplifting energy coming from deep within the earth as the plates are subsiding underneath the North American continent. And so literal eruptions are going on, mountains that are forming in very recent geologic history. The youngest of them is a place called Beacon Rock. And I can pull up a picture of Beacon Rock here to give people a sense of this. So Beacon Rock was about, I think, 57,000 years ago. Not that old in terms of geologic history. So what we're looking at on the screen is the second largest monolith in the northern hemisphere. And Beacon Rock is basically this volcanic plug. It rises 840 feet above the river floor. And so we've talked about these, the basalt floods, the mountains erupting, but the real big thing that most people are familiar with is the Younger Dryas flooding. And so this happened about 15,000 years ago, between 15 and 12,000 years ago. And there's theories that there was a great glacial lake in Montana that had an ice dam that broke and flooded. The theory that I like, that makes more sense to me, is that a series of meteorites impacted the Canadian ice shelf back during the Ice Age, flash melted it, and poured all that water across eastern Washington. And so that created the incredible channeled scablands with these enormous erosional features. And that all got backed up at basically the eastern end of the gorge, a place called Wallula Gap. And so the amount of water we're talking about is equal to 10 times the flow of all rivers on Earth combined. It was a truly epic and biblical event. And during the Younger Dryas catastrophe, 90% of the megafauna on North America went extinct. And so we're talking about creatures over 60 pounds. These are including things like mammoths and woolly rhinos and the panther atrox, which was an American lion. Enormous creatures all went extinct at this time. So this river, this flooding event is all channeling through the Columbia River Gorge. In some places, those waters get to be over 1,100 feet deep, and they completely scour all of the landmass, and what they leave behind are the stunning cliffs and steep walls of the gorge. And so as we're looking at this picture of Beacon Rock, it's this giant rock monolith with the sides completely exposed, and you can see the hexagonal columnar basalt on it. What's amazing about this particular place, Beacon Rock, is there's actually a trail pinned to the side of the cliff, and families with kids and dogs make it up there all the time. It's one of my favorite morning hikes. So just a truly incredible place. There's another really amazing picture. Let's see. This is a picture of Mount Adams, a picture of Mount Hood here. The Columbia River Gorge is a living landscape, and it has this extremely complicated geologic history. And there are all these incredible energy eddies and currents going on. You know, I mentioned that there were these 300 eruptive events. Well, that's all stacked up like a layer cake, but each one of those layers, the magnetic grains within the rock is oriented in a different way. As the Earth's magnetic poles wandered over the millennia, each time the lava erupted and cooled, the magnetic grains were locked into a particular orientation. And then, several 100,000 years later, another eruption would happen and the grains would be locked in another way. What that means for the gorge is that there are places here where when you look at government maps, navigational maps, they have warnings in giant pink letters that say area. So there's this complicated electromagnetic story going on here. There's this complicated energetic flow with all the rivers and the mountains and all these other forces. And what that has led to, we way over-index on paranormal experiences out here. Everything, like I said, from UFOs to glowing orbs to Sasquatch encounters. There's many ghost stories, tales of small humanoids. Some people would consider them fey-like creatures. And so there's this enormous, and there's even an enormous black panther creature that we call the Klickitat Ape Cat that's out here. Very interesting story that may be related to the Hanford nuclear site, which is where they created the plutonium for the first nuclear weapons. But and that's just upstream from us. And so all of these things are going on here. And in my little store there in Bingen, we put up this sign kind of innocently. I have some personal interest in it, and it's just fascinating. I mean, every couple of days, a Scooby-Doo mystery walks through my front door, and we hear some incredible tale. And it is so common for the people who live in the gorge to have a neighbor, or for themselves to have had a Bigfoot encounter or a UFO experience, or to have seen orbs. And so these people are coming in through my door, and we're taking the reports. And I realized, wow, I'm just an old adventurer. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a formal researcher. And so I'm conducting interviews like this to invite people to come out and see for themselves. I would love some help in trying to understand these mysteries. Like I said, I've got some theories, but it's just a absolute paranormal soup out here.
I think what makes the gorge so different as well is there's these magnetic effects that take place there as well. There's something different about the energy that's there, and it's sort of it feels like it's kind of channeled in there, this energy as well, right? So my question was, what makes it a paranormal hotspot? But I think it's all connected.
I do think it's connected, and like I said, there are theories that I have come up with. I do know that research has been done that so electromagnetic influences can influence brain activity, and there may be some kind of connection. For that to be true, there would need to be some kind of evolutionary benefit to it, right? Like, just to dismiss it's a hallucination with a hand wave is to say, well, why do so many people have the same hallucination? Like, there needs to be, if you have this particular stimulus in your environment, this particular thing results in your brain. For that to occur across a population, that means that there needs to be some kind of evolutionary benefit. And anyone who's ever said it's just a hallucination hasn't really demonstrated that. And so what I think is happening is that instead of it being something tuned to channel reality, physical world that we all know and spend most of our time in. But there are some substances and electromagnetic influences that can switch the channel that your brain is perceiving. And so when that happens, and this is very common if you look at the studies related to DMT, how people have had visionary experiences when they ingest large quantities of that chemical, which happens to be a naturally occurring brain chemical to begin with. And so you're able to then perceive things that you don't normally perceive in your normal mode of perception. That, or there is something that's like all of this. If you imagine that there are worlds that are adjacent to each other, maybe different dimensions, and you have these very abrasive cataclysmic events going on here, and it's really in a confined space. It's, the river at the most is, like, at its widest spot, this river is maybe the canyon is maybe 5 miles wide. In other places, it's like 2 miles wide or a mile wide. And within that, like in a half a mile, you're at 3,000 feet in some places. So, like, it's all funneled into this one spot. And you've got this powerful 20 million year old energy current flowing through here. And, some people think, oh, well, energy is woo-woo and, show me some kind of data. Well, the Columbia River has got 14 dams on it that convert the hydroelectric energy, hydropower, into electrical power. 40% of the U.S. hydroelectric power generation happens in this canyon. And so this is literally, you're taking the energy from the river and converting it into an energy form well recognized by science and saying, well, there's nothing strange going on here. But there is something very strange going on here. And in fact, we'll get into this maybe later in the interview. There's a place called the Hanford Nuclear Site. Back in the 1940s, during the Manhattan Project, they needed a remote site that had power generation and cooling water, and they chose a site on the Columbia River. And it literally altered the fabric of reality there. They created elements that do not exist in nature on an industrial scale, namely plutonium. And they could not have done that without borrowing the energy that's flowing through this riverbed. And so, like, on a very tangible, any engineer could say yes and measure it kind of a sense, like, there is enormous energy flowing through here. And so, like I said, if there are adjacent dimensions or realities, this place is a place where those boundaries between those worlds would have been abraded thin. Through apocalypses of fire, through apocalypses of flood, through these magnificently huge landslides, through these eruptive processes. And so all of that has created this amazing like jigsaw puzzle of energy entities and flows. And so I'm just an old adventurer. My knees are bad. I'm not a scientist, but you come here, and even if you're not spiritually sensitive at all, you know you're in an enchanted, magical place. Like, it's an undeniable feeling, and it's jaw-droppingly beautiful in places. It takes your breath away when it's sunrise or sunset. Your heart is filled with this inexplicable joy. You know that things are happening here, and so yeah, I think that that's kind of my operating theory about why things are so strange.
Now, I wonder as well if the Native Americans, when they used to live on that land, had stories that would go back in time as well, with the same, trying to understand what they were interacting with as well.
Well, there are long traditions, especially with what we call Sasquatch. Oftentimes down here, they're referred to as skookum. And so the Native Americans who lived here, there's several, just to name a few, they have traditions that are filled with a living earth. Everything had a spirit associated with it. And there are some very specific spirits throughout their traditional stories. There are stories of little people. And this is one of the ones, for whatever reason, I can wrap my head around a Bigfoot. I can wrap my head around a giant black panther. I can wrap my head around UFOs. But when it comes to little people, and these are bipedal creatures, they seem to stand anywhere between 18 inches to 3 feet tall. And in some of the stories that I've read, they are responsible for carving the petroglyphs that are here in Klickitat County, which is the county where my stores are located. And in other tales, they have very much the same characteristic and traditions. And so to me, those stories are, to them, just a natural part of what's going on out here. And there are river monsters and lake monsters. I should call them spirits, perhaps. And so the tales that they tell of the experiences they live are replete with these types of beings. And there's a recognition that they're not necessarily originating in the physical realm that we know. There's very clear recognition in many of those traditions that there is the physical everyday today world, and then there's a spirit world. And for those traditions, it seems that the blending of those is much more seamless or integrated than the way we perceive things as modern Westerners. So fascinating stuff.
Very fascinating. And was there any sort of like missing people that happened in the area? Has that been told to you at all? So
yeah, we have some stories of people going missing. So as I mentioned in the intro, I am a search and rescue EMT, and there are places out here. Let me give you an example. There's a place, it's kind of over my shoulder, this shoulder here. We call it Broke Leg Barrows. It is an old lava flow, and so series of micro canyons with jagged rock, and it's an area the size of the island of Manhattan, and it's literally just a few miles from my house. And because of the lava flows or whatever, I have stood at the edge of that thing, and I've ventured maybe a couple hundred yards into there. And, I am a professionally trained expert land navigator. I've been through jungles and deserts and forests, mountains. I can competently handle myself in just about any terrain. And I am afraid I don't think I could travel, forget paranormal activity or strange creatures. Like, I don't think I could travel a mile through that terrain and not get hurt. And so there are places like that are all throughout the Cascade Mountain Range. And actually, basically through my backyard, the Pacific Crest Trail, which is a trail which extends from Mexico all the way to Canada. It literally runs right through my hometown, Stevenson, Washington. And so there are many strange tales of things happening on that trail and people encountering strange things. But, the tales that I hear are less about missing folks and more about what seems to be like just this. Coming from Seattle, it is just a surprisingly common thing to have these crazy experiences. I shouldn't say crazy. I should say highly unusual, right? And the one that really stuck out to me. So I was in the store one evening. A gentleman came in, and he had actually been his family had been friends with my mother-in-law Margie before she passed away. And so there was a little bit of a family connection. I hadn't met him before. And it took him about 45 minutes to work up the courage to tell me about his experience. But he was orienteering near Buck Creek, which is about 4 miles west of the store. And so orienteering, you had a map and compass, you're navigating and trying to find your way through the forest. He's a competent woodsman, knows what he's about. And he said that his compass started acting strange. And shortly thereafter, he looked up across the creek, and standing there watching him, I should say sitting, was this enormous black panther creature. And he described it as very muscular, black fur that was 3 to 4 inches long. And so right there, my flag started going up. Now, of course, we have cougar that live in the area, and they're very reclusive. But cougar are always either tan, and if they are expressing their melanin, they go to a reddish color. Black is not on the menu. And when we talk to wildlife experts, there are no scientifically documented cases of black cougar in Washington State or anywhere in the United States, for that matter. And so right away, he's talking about a big black cat. So that shouldn't exist. And then he said, and it stood about 4 to 5 feet tall at the shoulder. And I thought, well, wait a minute. That's really unusual. The largest living cat is a tiger, and they maybe get to be 3 feet tall at the shoulder. Cougars, maybe 24 inches tall at the shoulder. But an animal that is that size is not an animal that's recognized by science as existing at all. There is, like I said, only one creature in the fossil record that does match that description, and that is the panther atrox, the American lion, but that was thought to have gone extinct 10,000 years ago. But the fossil remains, and they found them all over from Canada, all the way down to the La Brea tar pits down in LA. So absolutely, this was its habitat during the Ice Age. So that's the only creature that even biologically matches the skeletal size of this creature we're talking about.
And do you think that Black Panther, though, do you think that's a paranormal entity in a sense, or?
So there's one more thing that he told me that night. And he said, and James, when I looked at it, it had a face that looked like a monkey. And I thought, whoa, wait a minute. That's something that's really uncommon. There are no known cats that have faces like monkeys. And so we had a couple of things. So when I talk about paranormal, I talk about things that seem to defy the laws of nature as we currently understand them. And now we have a creature that is expressing a coloration that's not scientifically recognized. It's a size that's seemingly impossible. And it's got facial features that are either highly mutated or not realistic or not recognized by science. There's some magnetic compass stuff going on, but that just could be the area that we're in. And he said it wasn't long before they watched each other for about 5 minutes. He said it seemed to have intelligent ape-like eyes. Incidentally, that Panther atrox has the largest brain case of any cat ever known in the fossil record, living or extinct, both by total capacity and as a ratio of its body size. And then he said the creature turned and disappeared into the forest. And so that vanishing behavior, so there's a couple of things there, but I wasn't ready to say that it was a paranormal animal. Well, I was very, very excited about this. And so the next day I was talking to my employees about it, and one of them started shaking. So Missy's a very honest and earnest young lady. And she said, James, I've seen that creature myself when I was driving through Klickitat Canyon. And just to give you a little sense, so basically on the Washington side, there are 2 counties There's Skamania County, which is where my house is. In the 1960s, Skamania County had so many Bigfoot sightings that they actually outlawed hunting and killing Bigfoot, and you will go to jail and have thousands of dollars in fines. That's how seriously they took it. And then there's Klickitat County, which is sort of the area that fades from rainforest into desert. And Klickitat County is more of an arid landscape and some very steep and beautiful river canyons. And so she lives up Klickitat Canyon. The Klickitat River flows off of Mount Adams and into the Columbia River. And she said, I was driving down Klickitat Canyon one morning at dawn, and I saw this enormous black cat walking near the side of the road. She said that it entered a small patch of tall grass. She stopped her car to watch it. She was so struck by it. She clearly remembers this black fur and the long black tail. And she watched that patch of grass, is a very small patch of grass, for 5 or 10 minutes, and it never came out the other side. She eventually got out of her car and was thinking maybe she should warn the households nearby that there's an enormous predator. And she saw no traces of this creature. When she told her family about this, they didn't believe her. They told her that maybe she had seen a cow. And I mean, if you think about when people have unusual experiences, the people that they talk to want it to be a normal experience. Like there's this really strong urge for the world not to be known and not to be unusual and crazy. And so the people who have these experiences often find themselves in a very lonely place. And so, you know, they told her she'd seen a cow, and this is a grown woman. She knows the difference between a cow and a black panther. I mean, like, and so she just shut up about it. And the reason why she was shaking when I told her about it was because it was validation of this incredible experience that she had had. And from the beginning, as we started taking in these reports, I told my employees, we will always treat these witnesses with respect. If people come in and they want to have fun and they're going to tell a tall tale, no harm, no foul. You know, I'm not, like I said, I'm not a scientific organization. But the sense of relief that so many of the witnesses who've come into the store have when they're not told they're crazy, we don't instantly try to jump in and explain to them what they experienced, having not been there ourselves. And just the notion that someone's going to ask them intelligent follow-up questions, take their report seriously, believe the witness, is, to me, like one of the most delightful and unexpected surprises of this whole endeavor we're engaged in, is the human connection that we've made with people who've had extraordinary experiences who haven't been believed by anyone else. But that really doesn't yet say that this is a paranormal creature. Later, a gentleman came in and said, you know, I think I've seen that as well. He was out working in a shed, and on our website, if you go to the Klickitat Ape Cat section under the paranormal section, margiesoutdoorstore.com, I put up a little video about his experience. So he was able to catch some video footage. Now, don't get excited. It's not conclusive proof at all. Basically, you can see the creature's eyes blinking. And that's maybe 7 or 8 seconds of this. But what's significant about it, he said, as I took out my phone to film it, the battery in my phone and the battery in my headlamp died simultaneously. And so there's an electromagnetic effect that seems directly related with witnessing the creature. So again, the video isn't conclusive. There's some interesting vocalizations on it. But we have what I would call a constellation of effects. So the constellation is electromagnetic interference. You've got a creature that seems to be exhibiting impossible biology, especially this monkey-like face. You've got vanishing behavior. And each of these witnesses explained to me that they felt like they were in the presence of something magical or something special. Like they knew that this wasn't a normal encounter. And so to me, that's a constellation that says, yep, this very well could be something that's paranormal. And these reports are very similar to the Sasquatch reports that we get, where people see something that they know is not like any animal that's out here. And to give you a sense, so like I said, the Columbia River Gorge is 80 miles long, and there's about 70,000 people that live here. The population density is about 10 people per square mile. And so these are people who have lived in rural rugged areas, for many of them for most of their lives, even for generations. They hunt, they fish, they hike, they explore. They know what the wildlife is. It's sort of like, if you live in the city, like the difference between a bus and a car and a trolley, like what a cab looks like. And so for us who live out here, like we know our animals. They walk through our yards. I mean, it's not like we're going to mistake a bear for a cougar or something else. And so we know that we're looking at something that is really unusual. And so the question is, how do you explain this? So even if it's just a melanistic cougar or just a mundane big black cat, the only big black cat on the North American continent is the jaguar, black jaguar, and their range extends wildland fire crew. And so having been a former wildland forest fighter myself, there's a lingo and a familiarity, and you know who you're talking to. And she wanted to know what the story was, and so I kind of gave her some of the high-level outlines. She said, yeah, well, my crew encountered that between Mount St. Helens and Mount Adams when we were out on an extended mission, and we wondered what the hell we were going to do for 3 days if it wandered into our camp. And so, a wildland forest firefighter is one of the most competent wilderness people you're ever going to find. They are not only dropped into the most dangerous remote areas, but they're dealing with it during a fire. And so these people who know what they're doing, know how to take care of themselves, and understand their surroundings better than just about anyone else out there. And so, I'll be hearing these reports and I won't hear a monkey face story for a while. Maybe it's just a big black cougar. But nope, it keeps on reoccurring. We've had senior law enforcement officials tell us that they've seen it. The reports go back more than 30 years, for sure. We have had reports of the animal with a kit or a cub, so a young cat with a mother cat, both black, and that was reported in someone's driveway. And so those are some interesting components, right? About 20 minutes east of my store, there's a set of petroglyphs, and maybe I can pull this up on the screen here. Picture of the petroglyphs. Yeah, here we go. So I hope you can see what I've got here on my screen. What we're looking at is a large rock that's tilted on its side. It's got the face of a cat with large eyes and pointed cat ears, jagged teeth. And underneath it are wavy lines like water. Now, when I did my research on black cats, across the globe, black panther creature is almost universally associated with a protector spirit. And so whether that's in ancient Egypt, in Asia, South America, this panther protector concept comes up again and again. Even in Christian medieval mythology, they talk about the black panther being analogous to Christ, and that all creatures adored the black panther except for the dragon, which was terrified of it and would flee at the sound of its voice. One of the most interesting legends I came across was from the Great Lakes Native Americans, and they talk about a race of supernatural panther protectors they call the Mishepeshu. And the Mishepeshu, when Native Americans refer to something as being from the underwater realm or the underground realm or the sky realm, they're talking about a creature or a being that is has a foot in the physical world that we know every day and the spirit world. And one of the most interesting things about the Mishepeshu is they are described as a black panther with the face of a man. And so even here in Klickitat County, we have petroglyphs that seem to be indicating a cat-like creature associated with some perhaps water symbolism. So a lot of interesting mysteries going on there. There's also a place about 20 minutes north between my store and Mount Adams, a place called Isetti Ranch. Isetti stand. Yep, that stands for Enlightened Contact with Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And so Jim up there has been going for decades, and you can visit his ranch and watch UFOs fly around Mount Adams. And what's interesting, if you go to eseti.org, you'll see their logo pop up, and it's got the face of a lion in it. And apparently, one of the extraterrestrial intelligence they're in contact with is a race of feline humanoids. Now, I haven't had a chance to get up and visit myself, but I find it fascinating that the White Salmon River sort of runs through the town of Trout Lake, which is where the ranch is located. And that is directly, I mean, Buck Creek is on the White Salmon River. Like, these places are all closely related. So there's this, a lot of circumstantial evidence that there is some type of race of supernatural Black Panthers. And there's a couple of different touch points in the area. But again, nothing here is conclusive. And so as I broadened my search to try to determine, like, where could this be coming from? What is if we're not going to rely on some type of supernatural explanation to invoke the presence of these creatures, what could it possibly be? Now, about maybe 100 miles east of the store, there is the Hanford Nuclear Reservation, which I mentioned. So this was spun up during World War II. The Allies were terrified that the Nazis were going to unlock the secrets of the atom. And so they created the Manhattan Project. Famously, there was a group of scientists in Los Alamos who were engineering the bomb. But what a lot of people don't know is that the Hanford site, which is a place along the Columbia River in the desert, was selected as the place where they would build the reactors that created the plutonium that would be used in the bombs. And this was the precursor to the atomic, or the Department of Energy. This was the most top secret thing that was going on. They had 50,000 workers build this thing in less than a year. It was the first nuclear reactor on an industrial scale that was ever built. By the time the Cold War was over, they had 9 nuclear reactors running there. They created enough plutonium to build 60,000 nuclear weapons. And so this was the site where they were building. They were literally toying with the fabric of reality, creating elements that don't exist in nature and doing it on an industrial scale. Well, what a lot of people don't know about the Manhattan Project and the fear that the Nazis would unlock the secrets of the atom first was the Nazis were very into genetic engineering. And so they were building super soldiers. They're trying to build super soldiers, trying to build super animals. They had apparently brought back an Ice Age creature called the aurochs, which is a gigantic hyper-aggressive bull, and populated an entire forest in Europe with them. And so they were intensely interested in genetic manipulation. And in the 1940s, we didn't know as much as we know now about how radiation impacts biology, but we did know that it induced mutations. And so from day one, the Hanford site had an animal testing program. And the guy that they chose to run that program was a guy named Dr. Lorne Donaldson from the University of Washington. And his only academic achievement of note prior to receiving that assignment was he had created a thing called the Donaldson super trout. This was a fish that was 8 times stronger than a natural normal trout. It reached sexual maturity in half the time. It could swim in salt water and fresh water, was super survivable, and in fact is still a viable fish species today. So they picked Donaldson to run their animal testing program. Well, we win the war. The Cold War springs up. Animal testing gets even bigger there. Donaldson winds up going to the South Pacific and Bikini Atoll and the Castle Bravo tests and all that kind of crazy stuff going on down there. And they assign a new guy named Bill Bear, and he is running the animal testing lab at Hanford. And he's passed away about 7 years ago, but I was able to listen to some of his oral histories. And he talks about the animal testing program. They could I've seen like those 1960s propaganda films. They called Hanford the Atomic Zoo. And they were testing all kinds of things going on there. And in fact, they were doing radiation tests on apex predators. He tells the story. They had either the reports are a little bit sketchy, between 20 and 50 alligators at Hanford. And they were doing radiological experiments on them. He holds up a picture of the device they used to irradiate these creatures. Well, one night, 6 of these irradiated experimental apex predators outsmart the scientists, and they escape into the Columbia River. And so you've got these 6 giant predators swimming around. There are contemporary newspaper articles about it. And they sent out these covert army hunting teams, and they only ever caught 4 of the 6 predators. And we've had reports even recently. In fact, Bill Barron in his oral histories talks about in the 80s getting calls about alligators in the Columbia, which he denied and laughed about and hung up. But so we've even heard stories of people having things tugging at their kayaks far upstream from where I'm located. So the thing to understand is that this was one of our most important nuclear sites, one of our most important research sites in the world. And you may ask yourself, well, why would they be bringing alligators? What would they be doing? Well, right now, a quarter of the U.S. nuclear stockpile is guarded by dolphins. And the reason is, dolphins are far better at identifying Soviet scuba divers than sonar. Like sonar can't distinguish if you're looking at a tuna or a sea lion or something like that, but a dolphin you can train. And since the 1950s, they've been training dolphins to protect our most sensitive nuclear sites. Apparently, I'm told that they put some kind of special apparatus on the snout of the dolphin, which has got like a barbed harpoon. The dolphin comes up and tags that diver, sticks the harpoon in him, and inflates a balloon, brings the diver to the surface. The Navy captures him. And so we do know that they had animal sentinel programs for our most sensitive nuclear sites. And the Columbia River has got 90 miles of river coastline. And that is an incredibly challenging thing to guard. And so the gators may have been there as a potential sentinel program. But if you're a cold warrior and you're doing your due diligence, you're thinking out of the box, you're going to ask yourself a simple question. What is the world's best riverine predator? And that answer is the black jaguar. If you look up YouTube, you'll see videos of jaguars. They can apparently hold their breath for 15 minutes. They can eat underwater. They can kill Cayman alligators with a single bite to the back of the head. Apparently, pound for pound, they are the strongest of the big cats. Not only that, they have night vision, which is 6 times better than human beings. And they always instinctively drag their prey to shore. So if you're a cold warrior who's in charge of protecting the Hanford nuclear site, and you are looking for an animal training program that's analogous to the dolphin training program, you're like, man, the black panther checks all the boxes. I mean, it really, really does. This is a creature which is an excellent predator on land, in the trees, and then also in the water. And of course, that intelligence gathering of being able to drag the prey to shore is, a dead Soviet diver at the bottom of Columbia does you no good. If you can gather intelligence, that's more the better.
Okay, James, well, we're just going to take a quick advert break and we'll be right back after this.
You're on a journey right now, a destination where you are headed full of adventure. And all around you are clues pointing you in the direction of your higher purpose and dreams. The signs and synchronicities can be seen whilst on a trip, at your local coffee shop, within your social networks. The road to your success and happiness is scattered throughout the pictures of our days. Simply make the connection, that's all. Channeling.com is your source for highly regarded spiritual readers who can direct you on your journey. Use the code TMS1 to receive a discount on your first reading.
Welcome back to the show. Now, just before the break there, James, I wanted to get into your research into UFOs and UAPs in the Gouge. And I wonder if some of this stuff people are witnessing is actually interdimensional.
It very possibly could be. This is a picture up here on my screen sent to me in February of this year, so just a few months ago. And this is Underwood Mountain, just a few miles away from the store. The picture was taken from 11 miles away. We've enhanced it in a couple of different ways. But it's very common for folks to see craft flying around above the mountains in the area. We've had reports of craft that are actually flying through the air, and then they dive into the Columbia and they go underwater. So that's an interesting level, there's also stories. This is a picture of Mount Adams, and in one of the smaller sub-peaks, that said that there is a physical door that opens and UFOs fly in and out. This is something you can see from the Isetti Ranch. And in fact, some of the pictures were taken from there. And so there is this definite idea that there is physical things. The very first UFO sighting was popularized flying saucer sighting, Kenneth Arnold, in the 1947. Those were craft that were flying from Mount Rainier to Mount Adams. So there's this idea that there's physical craft, and we've had reports of triangular-shaped objects flying over the Dalles, which is a town about 20 miles east of me. And the reports that we get really kind of fall into three categories. There are physical advanced craft, like flying saucers or flying triangles, or things that are physically interacting with, like this hangar on Mount Adams. There's also reports of orbs of light. And so we've had reports of floating orbs. These are commonly reported in some of the forested areas around here. This is by Beacon Rock. But they're also sighted along Highway 14, which is the road that runs along the northern shore on the Washington side of the Columbia River. And so a lot of reports of orbs, glowing lights, that don't have a physical craft associated with them. And then there are reports of actual military hardware that exhibits extraordinary properties, like helicopters that don't make any sound, things of that nature. Now, with the various crafts and things like that, there also seems to be this associated phenomena of portals opening. And so a gentleman came into the store, and he said, I want to tell you about a portal that I saw on Mount Hood. And I kind of jumped again. Oh, you mean the hangar door that opens? Nope. This was floating in the air next to it, and it looked like an opening in the sky that was different from the sky behind it. And he looked at it, and he thought there was something wrong with his eyes. He rubbed his eyes, and looked at it from several different angles, and it persisted. And he didn't know what to make of it. And what's interesting to me is so many of the stories that we have are just like, well, I was driving down the road one night, a big black cat jumped across the road, its body was as long as both lanes combined, and I never saw it again. That's the whole story. Or I was driving actually by Klickitat Canyon, and we saw what seemed to be a portal open on the side of the road, right by the tunnels there. And again, an opening in space that had a background different than the natural background behind it. So and again, these are reports that I'm receiving, and I don't have the resources to investigate them fully, and I'm giving you the information that was given to me. But it seems really, really clear, even when we hear about some of these Sasquatch stories, where, like, one of the gentlemen who sees them quite frequently, he's even brought me hair samples, says they seem to be able to, their speed of movement seems so fast that it almost feels like they're teleporting, like they can go make 50-yard jumps at a time, which is a considerable distance. And so in a blink of an eye, they've moved 50 yards. And he seems to think that that's some type of limited teleporting ability. But he's also of the mind that they are fully biological creatures. And so again, here's another one that really kind of I have trouble making sense of. What we're looking at on the screen is a small humanoid. So this was reported to me by a person I've known since I've moved down here. And they were driving home after a late work shift one night in the desert side of the gorge. And at this area of the road, they saw this creature that was no taller than the hood of their car, bipedal, and it had a head that looked like a praying mantis. And he said that he drove by it. He only really saw it for 3 or 4 seconds, right there, standing on the side of the road, basically looking at him. As he drove by, the lights in the center console of his car all went dark, and his phone alarm started going off. He got about 400 yards down the road, and he started feeling dizzy, and he had to pull over. For a minute, because he knew I'd be interested in it, he said he almost thought about turning around and going back and checking it out. But he didn't, because he thought, hell no, I don't need to get involved with whatever kind of trouble that is. So I went out and investigated this site. I didn't find any anomalous EMF readings. One of the things he said, though, is that in that same spot on the road, he had seen owls on at least 5 different occasions, owls standing on the side of the road. And owls are associated both with alien encounters or whatever these beings are. I don't know if they're from another planet or from another dimension or what they're from, but in the literature, when people talk about UFO abductions, it's very common to hear that there are owls present either before, during, or after that experience. I did find in my investigation some prints that were pretty inconclusive and a number of owl pellets on the side of the road. Also, interestingly, this is a place that is where power lines from one of the larger dams on the river run probably a couple hundred yards away from this site. So high levels of energy are coursing through this particular part of the desert. So we get reports like this. These reports are analogous to some of the Native American stories you hear about small people. And some of them have human-like features. Other of them have like these strange, more alien-looking features. And again, there's all kinds of high energy going on around here, like a very significant amount of that type of strange stuff. You know, I had mentioned that Hanford had that was doing all this nuclear stuff. But even today, there's a thing called the LIGO out there. It stands for the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory. And they've got these vacuum tubes that are 2.5 miles long, set perpendicular to each other. And if you go to their website, the stated purpose of this facility is to detect anomalies in the space-time continuum. I'm not making that up. Like, that is 100% what the government fund. This is a operation run by Caltech and MIT. And apparently, a week after they turned it on, they were actually able to detect these anomalies. And so there is very, very strange things going on here. And it's, yes, question?
Well, I was going to say there, is there missing time then? Have people reported that?
Absolutely. We have had numerous reports of folks missing time. For the people who have reported it, it's been questions of hours. They seem to be, some of those reports seem to be associated with some of the caves that are just a little bit northwest of the store, maybe 25-minute drive from our store. And so they'll enter in the caves and think that they've only been in there for a few minutes, and the sun will be going down, and times they seem to have lost several hours of time. And so, that's one of the, again, strange phenomenon that's going on out here.
Yeah, and there's no sort of, in all these encounters that people are describing, which are, fascinating, there's no sort of hostile encounters.
We haven't had any hostile reports. That may be an artifact of reporting. I think people may be less likely to talk about a hostile encounter. It may feel more crazy to them or whatever. And, to protect my employees and myself, we maintain a very positive mindset on all the things that we're doing. And so we may be just repelling the stories of negative interactions just through our presentation and who we are and the way we operate our affairs. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, there's a law of attraction kind of stuff going on where, you can attract different types of things depending on what you're putting out there. And we, the employees really enjoy it. It's one of the most fun parts of their job. But I work very hard to ensure that we have my number one North Star is that we have an enjoyable, healthy workplace environment. And so it's all part of a larger thing. And so there could be negative things going on out here. Obviously, tragedies occur and people have horrifying experiences. But for whatever reason, they're not being reported to us.
Interesting. Now, your website again is?
margiesoutdoorstore.com.
Now, when people come in person, they can get the actual, you do these, I was going to call it a book, but it's not really, is it? It's more of a guide.
Yeah, a guide. It's like a 4-page full color guide. We laminate them, and they are sort of, each one of them focuses on a different hotspot in the gorge. So one focuses on that Beacon Rock that we looked at. One focuses at another place called Horse Thief Butte, which is an extremely powerful spiritual center. It looks like a desert mesa from the road, but when you get up into it, it is riddled with a maze of hidden canyons and amphitheaters and petroglyphs. It is truly astonishing. And you can get up on top of it, and you have this expansive 260-degree view of the Columbia River Gorge and the mountains beyond. But that is actually close to where this creature here that's up on the screen was sighted. Also, we have sightings of the cat in that area. It also takes it to a ghost town. And so
I was going to ask you about that, actually, the ghosts and stuff, the apparitions.
Yeah. So, we're running close on time. I'm happy to talk as long as you'll have me, but so I'll let you guide me on that. But so that Beacon Rock area, very, very interesting, incredibly powerful. I mean, that tip of the iceberg of the Beacon Rock, that 850 feet of bare rock, extends miles into the earth. And I have talked with the maintenance workers there, and there are several of them who report seeing ghostly apparitions at some of the trailheads. These are slightly glowing figures. They look humanoid. They are unresponsive to people calling out to them, and they seem to wander off the trail and deeper into the forest. In that same area, we've had orb sightings, and just in front of the Beacon Rock, we had a gentleman who was out looking at a meteor shower in it was in November several years back. I was out there alone and saw one orb that turned into three, and then as they approached, they dissipated into a campfire set of sparks, and so those seem to be common. There is a hotel in Hood River just across the bridge from me. It's called the Columbia River Gorge Hotel, I think. Columbia River, yeah. That is considered one of the 10 most haunted buildings in Oregon State, and they have stories of 4 distinct ghosts who reside within the hotel itself. One is a little girl who apparently had drowned, a woman who had fallen off the roof, and there's a magnificent waterfall right there on these grounds, and apparently she had fallen into the falls. And one of the people who works behind the counter has apparently taken a picture of it. This same woman who I spoke to said that she has met a man in a top hat who was standing at the front entrance of the thing. There's also a historical museum here across the river from my home, a place called Cascade Locks. And there is a mannequin there that apparently says goodbye to some people when they leave at night. So again, my sense is that either this, because of the energy that's flowing through here, and it's so concentrated, it makes it easier for these things to cross the veil, or things that are not normally more difficult for us to perceive, or something else that's going on here.
Yeah, I think it just goes to show in some of these reports just how thin the veil is. We think,
exactly.
Yeah. What's it done for you in a sense? Well, how has it changed you, having these reports and going down this road for you personally?
The number one thing has been the interactions with folks who haven't been believed. There have been some really beautiful human connections. These are strangers, and when you take the time to listen to them, not judge them, support their experience. And although it's an experience that I haven't had myself, I can still empathize with them. And, there have been just some beautiful moments there. So that's been number one, the most unexpected treasure of the whole experience. Now, I've got a 9-year-old daughter, and I've rigged up my 4x4. It's got cameras and spotlights and all kinds of stuff, because we get these reports and we want to go check them out, and there are thousands of miles of dirt track out here, because the roads it's a thin ribbon of humanity, and once you're off them, you kind of need to be prepared for difficult stuff. Well, my daughter loves it. She can't get enough of it. I drop her off at this rig at school, and all of her friends point. It's got decals and everything on it, so that's been a lot of fun. But it was just a week and a day ago. So Monday, it was Labor Day here Memorial Day here in the States, and I was out in the garage. So we live about a mile from the river at an elevation of 800 feet, and we're surrounded by thick forest. And basically, there's one set of houses north of me. And then after that, it's about 700 miles of forest. And I'm working on the car, and I heard this large animal vocalization. And I thought, geez, is that an elk? Like it may be like an elk in rut bugling or something like that. And I'm out there listening to, and so I called out Evelyn, my co-investigator, and she's listening. She said, Dad, I think that's a squatch. And so we called up my wife, and my wife heard it too. And as my wife was out there, we started hearing knocking. So we'd hear this large vocalization, then a knock, knock, knock 3 times. Vocalization, knock, knock, knock 3 times. And they were coming from 2 different areas. So it seemed like a call and response. And so my wife and I were kind of raising our eyebrows at each other. And we put Evelyn to bed, and we looked up some elk bugling videos. It sounded nothing like it. And you have to understand, like, the sounds we were hearing had to be created by a creature that was at least 800 pounds. It was not a small noise. It's not a noise that bears make, and it was continuous. Like I said, this whole event lasted 45 minutes to an hour. And so we listened. Elk have a high whistle in their calls when they're bugling. There was no whistling, none of this high-pitched noise. And so we looked up some alleged Bigfoot vocalizations. And oh my God, it was spot on. We're like, holy cow. And so we didn't even have to leave the house to be having, experiences. And, for us, like, with that Ape Cat, 30 years of reports, no hostile encounters. The only Bigfoot hostile encounters I ever heard of started with people who had guns to begin with, right? Like there was a hostile intent that they were bringing to the event. We've had stories of, I guess what I'm saying is that as I relax into this magical landscape that I'm living in, like to be surrounded with wonder to me is, so check it out. Like I was an infantry soldier. I was a wildland force, mountain guide, EMT, search and rescue. I love adventuring. I've been spelunking. I've been paragliding, whitewater rafting. I've done all the things. And I have, a select number of my 10 out of 10 experiences. And then I come down here and it's like an open world video game. Like the terrain is like, it's the ideal outdoor adventure place. Like you couldn't have created one in a movie or whatever. And then as I'm gathering these stories and these tales and having these experiences and going to these places, just last weekend I was with my daughter and my son, and we were exploring Falls Creek Cave, which is one of the 50 longest caves in the world. And it's like minutes from our house. And there's this sense of magic and wonder. And all of my 10 out of 10 experiences are like dropping down to like 5 out of 10. And then the ones that are layered with this sort of sense of magic and wonder. Like just today, I was driving home and I stopped at a place called Government Island. And the whole air was just perfumed with wildflowers. And my heart was singing. And so, that's, I guess, what's changed, what's happened. It's living in an enchanted landscape.
Right. No, it sounds beautiful.
So,
yeah.
And so, my goal, the reason why I'm here talking to you is to encourage people to see for themselves, like what a magical, wonderful place this is.
You're making me, I feel drawn to go there. Do you know what I mean? I'm thinking, my God, my parents would love this place. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. You are. No, you're there for many reasons, but I hope interviews like this attract people to want to go visit. Most definitely. I mean, you get the decent summers. I'm sure it snows there in the winter as well, right? You get the seasons.
There's a bit. Yep.
Yeah, a bit. Yeah. It just sounds incredible, an incredible place. And from the pictures that you've shown and what I've seen online, just doing a little bit of research for you, wow, yeah, it's a very magical, energetic, special place. By the sound of it, there's something very special taking place there.
Yep, and your listeners can Margie's Outdoor Store. Cryptitat.com has got a lot of photos, and you'll get a sense of like there are sunrises that I've just, so I took my daughter to Horse Thief Butte, and I was sort of surprised her, and we went on a little adventure. This was a couple of years ago when Margie was still alive, and she just was running through these canyons and climbing up on top of it, and she's like, "Thank you, God." She was this, 6-year-old kid. Thank you, God. Thank you, God, for making such a beautiful place. Thank you, God, for bringing me here. And I was just like, as a dad, like that's a win that you never forget. That your daughter she loves playing like the Zelda games, and she felt like she was Link leaping from rock to rock. And so, that's the kind of joy that I'm trying to express and hope other people get a chance to see.
Absolutely. Well, you are, by just doing what you're doing, and God knows where this is all going to take you. It'd be interesting to get connected again in the future, right?
Here we are, just like a year and a half into it.
It's fantastic, and I know you've done other interviews as well, and I think that's really amazing. Exciting for you. And I guess there's a journey, and you're definitely on it, James, most definitely. And based all taking that chance for moving where you did do all those years ago, and definitely paid off. But yeah, there's some very unique stories here, and I know that obviously if people want to go to your website, there's more specific information about some of the stuff that we've discussed as well, and as you say, there's pictures and some video there as well. Okay, and people can contact you as well by going to your site, I believe. I think your contact details are on there. Yeah.
So if you need to get a hold of me via email, we've set up a staff at margiesoutdoorstore.com.
Okay.
And so we monitor that, and that's the best way to get a hold of me.
All right.
And I think that, in fact, that's how you found me. And so, and happy to do interviews and chat with folks, and also have folks file paranormal reports. If you come out here and have an awesome experience, let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess it's opened up your mind that there is more than just this reality, and what it quite is. That's the journey, isn't it? I suppose for some of us, and but just to know there's more, there's something much greater, and that veil is just so thin. So, James, I just want to thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh, it's really been my pleasure, Kevin. Thank you.